Okay, well, I suppose the best place to start is the beginning. So one question is, why the Navy? Well, it was pretty simple, really. I went to all four branches' website, and I filled out their form online for I want more information. And about 2 months later, I got a brochure, I think, from the Air Force. But the very day after I filled out these forms online, I had a recruiter from the Navy at my door. So, needless to say, I guess you could say that it was, you know, early bird gets the worm kind of thing. Didn't say much about the other branches in terms of initiative when I had a recruiter here and didn't hear from two and only got a brochure from one. So I talked to the guy, and he had me go to Dallas and take the ASVAB, and I did well on that. And then he had me take this advanced test. And he calls me up and he tells me, you got a 62. And I'm thinking, well, that's pretty awful. Okay, I guess. He's like, no, that's good. There's only like 70 questions or something. So it's like, oh, okay, well then, is that good? And so then he wanted me to go the nuclear route. And I'd asked him about officer, and I said, well, because my grandfather had been in the Navy for 20 years. He was on an aircraft carrier and retired as a chief. I said, well, what about being an officer? Because my grandfather always said, well, if you go in the military, be an officer. Well, at the time, I didn't know that officer recruiters and enlisted recruiters are separate. They're totally separate, and his response was, oh, you don't want to be an officer, that's a lot of responsibility. So I thought, okay, well, he knows what he's talking about, and we just kind of went about our way. Then on February 14th, in 2001, my now wife, who at the time was just my friend, we'd had an argument, so I said, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to enlist. So I enlisted on February 14th, so it makes it easy to remember. And I remember we got there, we stayed at a hotel in Dallas the night before, and then got to the processing station at 5 in the morning. And then by 5 in the afternoon is when I finally got into the office to talk to, I guess he's the detailer, about which job I wanted when I went to boot camp. And I told him, well, I want to be a translator. At the time, that's what I wanted to be. And he said, well, okay, but in order for you to be a translator, you have to take a different test. There's a language aptitude test that you have to take. So you need to go take that test and then come back. And I thought, I've just been here for 12 hours. And I said, well, you said nuclear power, those guys make a lot of money, right? And the guy's like, oh, yes, of course, they make a lot of money. I said, okay, well, we'll do that. And it was interesting. So that's how I joined, and that's how I went nuclear power. And at the time, it was about 5 months before I actually went to boot camp, and I was in the delayed entry program and met with them, I think it was once a month, and it was good. And then in June, shipped to Great Lakes, and I don't know, I thought boot camp was kind of fun, but when I got there, so I told myself, well, I don't know what I want to do in the Navy for sure, so I figured, well, I'll just set my sights on the highest, so I want to be the CNO. And I would revise my goal, of course, as I learned more and things of that nature, but I think always setting out what's the highest I might want to be and going down, for me, was pretty effective. As soon as we got our Blue Jackets manual in boot camp, I remember reading it. That was the only thing we could read on watch, but reading it and reading about all the officer programs and that sort of thing. And one of the other recruits that was in my division, his father was the career counselor at Power School, at Nuclear Power School, which is where I would go next. And I remember talking to him, and his father had told him about this program called Seaman Admiral 21. The Navy used to have, they would have the Seaman Admiral program, which was where you would get paid, you'd be active duty, you'd get paid, and then you would pay all your books and tuition from your pay. And then they also had the ROTC program where you got a scholarship for all those things, but you didn't get paid. Well, the Navy was trying to consolidate all of its officer programs, my understanding was. They wanted to consolidate their officer programs, and they wanted more enlisted to officer conversions. So the Seaman Admiral 21 program essentially merged those two concepts, and you stayed active duty, but you didn't. It wasn't a full scholarship, but for most places you would go, it was effectively a full scholarship.